Good morning, everybody. This is Panama Bartholomew with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and welcome to our sometimes monthly, sometimes more than once a month webinar series called Building Decarbonization Coalition Presents. We are doing webinars even before the global pandemic. And today we have a absolutely fantastic one. It's one of the real thought leaders in the building decarbonization space, Sean Armstrong from Redwood Energy. And he's going to be talking to us today about how to make your carbon positive affordable housing project also revenue positive. So we're very excited for that. I'm just going to briefly tell you a little bit about our organization and why we do these webinars, and then we'll get it over to Sean. So the Building Decarbonization Coalition is a cross-sectoral coalition of energy providers, manufacturers, the design and construction community, local governments, and non-governmental organizations. We're about 175 member strong organization working on both policy and market solutions to building decarbonization. We have the most affordable rates of any membership organization, and we'd love to, if you're not part of the organization yet, love to welcome you in to work with us about bringing about the kind of changes we need in everything from consumer awareness to rate reform to financing, better technology and better policies to be able to bring about the building decarbonization we need to meet our clean energy and clean air goals. So please feel free to join us, and we can put your logo up here at the beginning of these presentations as well. We released a roadmap a little over a year ago that called for the total decarbonization of California's buildings and laid out a pathway for how we think we need to get there. Key to that was calling for all new buildings being zero emission for residential buildings no later than 2025, and for commercial no later than 2028, and calling for a full decarbonization of the building stock by 2045 or sooner, which would include the stopping of sales of gas appliances after 2030 in California. And so you can see the goals that were outlined in the roadmap up there on the screen. And inherent behind those numerical goals were some overall philosophical goals about key areas of the market that are going to have to be achieved if we're going to meet our goals. And they're up there on the screen, but this webinar series really represents that first goal, is how do we build customer, builder, contractor, policymaker, really everybody awareness around the benefits of all electric living and decarbonized buildings. And so this webinar series is one way that we seek to try to build awareness. We try to bring in some of the top thinkers, some of the top doers in this space to be able to provide input and their expertise and advice about building decarbonization. And so if you would like to join us for future webinars, we have some fantastic ones coming up. The Building Decarbonization Coalition has hired EMI Consulting to do a large residential contractor needs assessment where we've interviewed installers of water heating equipment and space conditioning equipment, general contractors, electrical contractors all over California about what do they know about electrification, what do they fear about electrification, what do they know about heat pumps, what do they think about it, what are the barriers, what needs to change in the supply chain. And so on April 23rd, we're going to have a presentation on the results of that needs assessment. On May 14th, we're going to have a fantastic presentation from Scott Shell from EHDD Architects titled "We Can Electrify Every Building Type." And he's going to be going through design opportunities for every single building type, just to really show that we can, in fact, electrify every building type. And then on the 28th, we're going to have a fantastic presentation from Sean Oram from Ecotope, talking about how to design all-electric, super efficient central water heating systems. This is probably the big question mark in large building types for electrification. And so besides probably electric kitchens. And so Sean is really one of the national leaders in this space, and he's going to go into depths about how to design some of these systems. So you can see we have a wide variety of webinars coming up. We encourage you to join our mailing list. We encourage you to go to the website, register for these upcoming webinars so you can join us. And it's always on Thursdays, 10 o'clock Pacific time. So please do feel free to join the coalition. We have a number of ways you can join. Here's our website, buildingdecarb.org/join, to be able to figure out how to become more involved in the coalition. Sean, if you could start sharing your screen, I'll give your intro now. So Sean Armstrong is very much, I'm going to go ahead and say global leader on building decarbonization. He's been doing this for a long time, and he's focused his efforts in and around affordable housing field. And so he's had to work in what I would say is one of the hardest building types when you have to work in affordable housing to make things work. And he's developed techniques and tools that actually makes it one of the best building types to be able to do carbon neutral, zero net energy, carbon positive type projects. He got his education at Humboldt State University. He's a fantastic father. He's a great husband. He's very active locally in his community. He's a farmer, and somehow he still finds time to be responsible for more zero net energy, zero net carbon affordable housing units than anybody else in the country. So we're really honored to have Sean. He's a great presenter. He's a fun hang. And Sean, please take us away with your presentation. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Panama. Good morning, everybody. Panama and I go back all the way to college, so he's the only person I'd allow to be that gratuitously complimentary. Okay, so I'm gonna just say good morning, and then I'll shut off the video to make sure we don't have any interference issues. But here we go, stopping video and jumping right in. Hey, everybody. This is an affordable housing development. It's 100% solar powered, it's all electric, and this is one I just want to start with because it won the United Nations World Habitat Award, the grand prize, and it won an innovation award from the DOE. And it is one of the early developments that we did where we used a variety of tools that we're going to go through today in order to make it actually beneficial, financially beneficial for this affordable housing development. In other words, like the solar array and the financial tools we're going to talk about paid for about 1.5 of the apartments that you're looking at here. That was the additional benefit to the development of going down this path we're going to explain today. Okay, so hey, as Panama said, I'm on a farm. I grew up on a farm in rural Wisconsin. My parents are back to the landers, and we've got a little scene up here. So we're just having tons of piglets this spring, as we do every spring, like 50 to 100. So quickly, I met Panama at the Campus Center for Appropriate Technology. He was doing a biodiesel project while I was there. I was like a volunteer and as a co-director for a year. That place inspired me. That's the top right-hand corner. Was a science teacher for a few years, struggled to make enough money to get married and have children kind of thing. So I went to an affordable housing development company and worked from 2005 to 2011, basically started that company, didn't exist before I got employed, but learned how to do affordable housing, and then I went out and got grants. And then since 2011, I've been the design management lead for Redwood Energy, a partnership between myself and Michael Winkler. Okay, this is the kind of stuff that I would like y'all to do. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you can see the electricity demand, the net electricity demand. So this is a net of the solar array. And you can see in the wintertime, there's demand. And in about 8 months of the year, there's a net production of electricity. We did analysis of this, looking at its hour-by-hour demands over the entire year. Tons of work. We were able to say that this was a zero carbon development net. It obviously consumed carbon during the wintertime, and it decreased the amount of carbon intensity in the grid. It compensated for itself during the summer. So we have a 99% zero carbon development. It's actually just 2 water heaters not working correctly that tipped it to 99% instead of better. This is a project for farm workers in Dixon. It's close to Sacramento. It's if you eat almonds, these are people who are growing your almonds for you. So this is my former boss, Chris Dart. And this quote, I'm just gonna read to you. All electric is a no-brainer. The cost of bringing gas to a building site is expensive. In our developments, all electric is less expensive to build and just as efficient or more efficient in operations. And you can't generate gas on site, but you can generate electricity with solar electric panels to lower your bills. We became the largest affordable housing developer in the northern part of California, north of the Bay Area, through the strategies I'm going to explain. There's really no subsidies up here. The redevelopment agencies were closed at the same time as we were starting the business, essentially. And as a consequence, we had to be extremely innovative. And Amelie, yes, we'll definitely share the slides afterwards. Okay, now I'm going to go through 2 basic points. I'm going to start in reverse order. We're going to talk about the solar component of it, and then we're going to talk about getting rid of the fossil fuels. So first, if you're into affordable housing, you're probably familiar with the idea of a utility allowance. A utility allowance is the amount of money that a tenant has as their allowance that they will not pay in rent, but instead is reserved for them to be able to pay their utility bills. And this is a flexible number. What you're seeing here is the 3 traditional ways in which people have established utility allowances, meaning the amount of money that the tenant does not pay in rent, but does pay in utility bills. It's an average, and the housing authority, just like the federal housing authority schedule, it might be quite high. Like $175 is what we had in Lake County, which is a rural county up here, just for a 2-bedroom for this all electric apartment. The HUD utility allowance calculator, a different tool published by Housing and Urban Development, same apartment, is about half as much. And then we actually reviewed every single tenant's utility bills, and we found what PG&E's actual bills were, about $68 for that same 2-bedroom. The reason why we did this analysis is because this specific project was about to fall out of affordability. It was $20,000 a year in the red, year after year, not able to pay its bills. And the developer owner was considering canceling its affordable housing status so that he could raise the rent in order to pay the mortgage on the property. So we were brought in to change it from $175 down to whatever it was accurate, which ended up being $68. And this project is still an affordable housing development as a consequence. So this can be kind of life or death for affordable housing developments. In 2005-06, I got to meet my friend and mentor, Nehemiah Stone, when I was brought down to Sacramento to try to comment on how the state of California could distribute funds to affordable housing to install solar arrays, because there were significant rebates for it, how they could do that when there wasn't really money there. The split incentive that you guys are probably familiar with that phrase, meaning a landlord of any building, they would benefit by investing in energy efficiency, because energy efficiency is generally cost effective and has a financial benefit and a payback. They would benefit, but the problem is that the tenants get the benefit and the owner doesn't. And you see rental housing all over the nation being a much lower standard than what the owners would have for their own homes, primarily because it doesn't pay for itself. They can't figure out a way to recapture the money. So this, the IRS responded in 2009 with a national policy allowing any state, and all states now do this, to use an energy consumption model. And it has criteria. The consumption model must take into account the unit size, building orientation, the design, materials, mechanical systems, appliances. You have to do a very detailed, accurate model of the building. And then you can reset the utility allowances to be a small number. And that allows the rent to increase. I'm going to walk you through how that actually works on a spreadsheet. Okay? On the upper right-hand side, these are real utility allowances this last year. So we could just look at like the 1-bedroom. $99 is the total of all these things in yellow. Now, for that 1-bedroom down below, you can see that we have a different number. This is what the utility allowance would show us, $5. This is a project that's been made all electric, no gas, and then solarized completely so that the utility bills are as low as they can be. Now the difference between $5 and $99, that $94 a month, I'm going to show you how that money gets used in an affordable housing spreadsheet, that change. So up on the top, I realize this is a spreadsheet. The Public Housing Authority's utility allowances, that $99. It's there in blue right in the middle, UA each, $99. If you go below, you can see UA each, $5. So how this makes a change in the revenue, note the word net rent, which is right next to it. Net rent is the quantity of money that's actually paid the owner. It's called net rent. So with a $5 utility allowance, you can see net rent is $8,978, whereas with the housing authorities, it's $6,628. That amount of additional rent plays out where we have an annual number of $79,000 if it's the housing authority for those one bedrooms. You go down below, you see it's $107,000. It's a significant difference. It's 25 grand a year approximately. Next, on the left, you can see how the housing authority's utility allowances play out, where we have effective gross income here at $402,000 versus $453 with the California Utility Allowance Calculator. The CUAC stands for this customized utility allowance calculator. Down here in blue, that additional money allows, or lack thereof, on the left-hand side you can see there's $1.46 million that you can take in a loan with that amount of money coming in rent, because the loan is sized to the rent for 15 years. That's a 15-year loan there. And on the right-hand side, there's $2.125 million. So over the course of a 15-year repayment period, there's about a $600,000 difference. You can see it here very clearly. This is the summary. So if you have leveraged debt, utilizing the California Utility Allowance Calculator, which is specific to the energy efficiency and the solar inputs, the debt, the loan that you can get to develop this project, here it's $2.1 million versus $1.46 million. The difference there of $664,000, that's money that you can spend then towards installing that solar array. Now the solar array that was put on this development to make this happen, it cost $342,000. And there was a 30% tax credit. Now it's 24% tax credit. We didn't even need the tax credit, as you can see. The upshot is that the net benefit to provide solar was $400,000. Now, one apartment in this development, Eureka Veterans, is $350,000. There's 40 apartments there. So this is an example of the solar array paying for an additional apartment. Or you could think of it differently, like paying for 2.5% more housing. It's not an amazing amount of new money, but it's the difference between a project being financially viable and not sometimes. This is how essentially we've succeeded in getting rural zero net energy housing, where there's in areas that have no subsidies to throw in. And the only way the project can get financed is if it has an amazing balance sheet like this does. So this project is funded and it's almost done construction. And really pleased to see how by making utility allowances accurate to the actual development's utility bills, which allowed the net rent to increase by that same amount of money. So overall, tenants don't pay a different amount of money before or after. It's still within their affordability quantity. Now I'm going to take a pause here and look at what looks like some chat questions. So Ruchi Shah asks, is this a low-income housing tax credit project? Yes, it is. which agencies would let the CUAC be used, I'll show you just in a moment, most all of them. This software, the CUAC, is specific to California, but I've done work in Maryland and in Pennsylvania and in Florida, and as a consequence, this is a national policy and each state adopts its own calculator. So widely accepted, the software came out, I believe, in 2008, 2009, around then. And since then, we've gotten approval letters and projects have been funded by HUD, CTAC, which is the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee, the loan folks, the CID-LAC, Housing and Community Development, the USDA. So essentially everybody. It doesn't work with Section 8 housing vouchers, unfortunately. So if a project has housing vouchers, the rent and utility allowances are kind of stuck. But other than housing vouchers, it works. This is what it looks like. It looks very similar to the number are different, of course, but you can see on the left how there's a breakdown for each of the items, heating and cooking and lighting. And then on the right-hand side, there's a summary of this project, Mutual Housing at Spring Lake. This is the image in the first page, that big aerial photo of that cool apartment complex with its approximately $5 utility allowances. Yeah, just showing you one again. This is in SoCal Edison, and it's not always $5. Just something to note that it's a variable amount of money because there's a variable amount of solar that people put in. It's exact to your project. So this is one of the developments I'm really proud of. It was I got this funded in 2008. It didn't actually get built until 2012 because of the recession that started right at the moment that we got the funding. So that slowed us down. But to see how this worked out, this is back when we're in the 2008 Energy Code. So there was a cost increase to go 15% above code, which was a threshold for that project. And so I've got those itemized, like what did it take for us to go from 0 to 15% above that code? The solar rate is most of the cost. It's like $9,600 of the total cost of $12,582. And you can see that there was actual cost savings by not putting in on-demand gas water heaters. It was a little bit cheaper the way we went. The project costs were $440,000 all in. And that strategy I just explained of increasing the net rent by decreasing the utility allowance, that raised $430,000. So it was cost neutral for this development to go 100% zero net energy. And it was more competitive. This is how we actually won funds from the United States Department of Agriculture. So it was the threshold for getting any funding from the USDA. We won the funding and it made it cost neutral. So this is back in 2012 when this project is getting built and financed. It opens in 2013, but all the bids and such come in 2012. When we opened this and it was cost neutral, it was clear to me that year in 2012 that we should be doing this on every single project, everywhere. That this was a huge benefit to the tenants. They really appreciated having solar arrays, not just for pride, because I don't want to understate that. Like, people feel very proud to have a solar powered home. They think that's just for rich people generally. And as a low income household, to have a solar powered apartment, definitely people are proud of it. But it also has so many other implications as an environmental solution, as a way to bring more revenue into developments that are in rural areas. This isn't just going to show this a few times over. I want people to see how this works because it's key. Let's move this a little bar away. So this is that project you saw in Woodland. It's another example. Overall, it meant in 1 year, putting the solar array on, it raised $92,000 a year in additional rent, as people's utility allowances went from $90 to $5 or $181 to $5. That generated $1.1 million in permanent loan. The solar array for this project is about $400,000. So you can see that would be $700,000 of additional revenue which means that there were about 2 more apartments built here. I think it was 62 apartments, so you could say 2 of the 62 were funded by this strategy of solarizing and making the rents and utility allowances accurate to the project. Carol, you're saying you're calling in from Massachusetts, and we're not selling RECs. This is a directly owned solar array. So the owner buys it and installs it. Yeah, there's a debt coverage ratio. This all has to be approved through the underwriters. And we have used retrofits doing utility allowances savings. That was fun in Florida. That developer was benefiting well, and so they actually installed TVs for everyone as a way of doing energy efficiency. And the utility allowance adjustment paid for super energy efficient TVs in all homes. So 15-year, this is one down in Monterey. And what's good about this is you can see the impact of gas versus electric. So the first two, energy factor of 0.95, they're using like the proposal that they would normally have done was to use a super efficient water heater and then use that for both water heating and space heating with a hydronic fan coil. And we said, well, you can do the same thing, but with a heat pump water heater. So we ran the utility bills, and with all of the things constant, you can see it was slightly cheaper, slightly more financially beneficial at $444,000 of lost rent, as I'm putting it. So it's only like $15,000 for the whole project to go all electric. There's no real savings there. Now, if you put a solar array on it, on the gas side, there's still gas bills. So now your lost rent is $150,000, much better deal. Now we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars of additional revenue that were brought in to the project and more than paid for the solar array. And going all electric though, the lost rent is only $16,000, 10% of what it would have been if we'd kept gas into the project. So at the beginning, Chris made this point of how you can't offset gas with solar. You have to use a PV array to accomplish it. And this is an illustration in the project's balance sheets. The most financially beneficial to go all electric and 100% solar powered. And I just do this over and over with clients where we run this scenario and I illustrate how their rents will go up more than the cost. And that's a financial improvement, and it also makes the project more competitive when there's competitive scoring having to do with zero net energy. Another great project. This is the first time tribal housing was ever funded in California by the state. It's only a few years ago. Tribal entities have been cut out of affordable housing financing all of these years, which is really upsetting, right? If you think about just people being people, having them be cut out. So when this project got funded, again, the only way that it got built was off this utility allowance strategy. They had no money up there in the reservation, and the tax credits themselves were not enough without a small subsidy. And this represented the subsidy. So this table here, you can see if it had been a propane and electric hybrid project with a high efficiency, they would have had a total bill of $79, which is rent that can't be charged. If they had gone to all electric only without solar, it would have been $59. And instead they went to zero net energy and they got $5 utility allowances. And that's why that group of people are standing there. People are excited about solar, but they mostly think it's expensive. In this case, this was the linchpin part of the financing for the first tribal housing ever built in California with state funds. So just explain what is the process of doing this? At the beginning, you meet with the client and you say, what's your rental revenue and operating budget goals? Do you guys want a $5 utility allowance? Does that make sense? It doesn't always, so it's worth having a conversation. Like if there's Section 8 housing vouchers, maybe that's not going to work out. We do, an energy model. It takes a while to do a really excellent model of a big set of buildings, and it has to be very accurate. It gets plan checked and such. And then we create a draft and we talk about it with the client, and it gets submitted for financing. Then after the project's funded, in the design development for construction drawings, the final drawings, you usually do some value engineering again, where you decide like what are the efficiencies of the windows and how much insulation, because they all have costs and benefits. Then you build it and you document it, and then you submit it to, in our case, to TCAC for funding approval. If you're in Florida, there's 3 pre-approved vendors, and it doesn't get submitted for plan check. Instead, these 3 vendors are trusted to do such a high quality job. I believe in plan check, but that's how Florida works. And you're done, and you have this utility allowance that gets updated annually for the next 15 years. People frequently want to know, is it accurate though? I mean, are we doing some harm to tenants by lowering the utility allowance and essentially raising the rent? And first is to say that this is accurate. On the left, you can see in bold black the average of all those lines, which are the tenant's actual consumption. And then the dotted line was the model. You can see that on the bottom as well, how closely the dotted line tracks the black line, that's the average. If you were to see that in summary, over on the right-hand side, these are different apartment complexes. You can see we're about 9% overestimating the bills. And it was actually, the bills were a tiny bit less than what we estimated at that project. I didn't get the percentage, unfortunately, in this one bedroom one, but it's similarly less than 10%. So you can see the range here also to understand that people every single day use energy maybe 3 to 4-fold between the lowest and the highest using apartments. People are very different in their consumption, even though their apartments are the same. And radically different sometimes, like a 10-fold difference in daily energy, which might equate to like a 3-fold difference over the course of a year from lowest to highest. So getting an average that's accurate to the average is an accomplishment, and just to applaud what building science can do. We can predict averages pretty well these days. Here's Chris again. So I wanted to focus on the first half of what he had to say. The cost of bringing gas to a building site is expensive. In our developments, all electric is less expensive to build and just as efficient or more efficient in operations. We'll go through some slides to illustrate that. Okay, so first off, nationwide, electrification trends, since 1993, we have been building as a percentage of housing more and more all electric. It's been concentrated in the South, where warmer temperatures have allowed sort of warm climate heat pumps to work. We started getting cold climate heat pumps in 2000. I installed one in my house in 2009. And their electronics inside of them allow them to still produce heat at like -20 Fahrenheit, where before they would stop at about 35 Fahrenheit. So we picked up like 50, 60 degrees of additional cold weather that you can still heat through. And developers nationwide have just acknowledged that it costs more to put in more infrastructure, and it costs less if you do less. Not magic there. So about 6 in 10 homes now in the South are being built all electric in 2020. In 2015, it was looking more like 50%, and it's gone up. Oh, and then, sorry, on the left-hand side, you can see in yellow, this is where market share of all electric housing has grown since 2010. The Propane Education Research Council hired ICF to tell them why their propane sales were declining. And the answer was because heat pumps, the ability to use a reversible air conditioner, which is a heat pump. It just is an air conditioner, it works in reverse. It is the exact same thing. It's just cheaper and easier to do that than to deliver gas to a project and then put in gas appliances. This is true in Vancouver. I'm just going to show some places around the world. This is not just a US phenomenon. 9 out of 10 townhome projects in Vancouver are all electric. It's true in Hong Kong. This is an all electric office building. It's being, the water heating is being done with a central system that's done by CUAC. You can see an image of the CUAC water heater there. And the scale of the building does not matter. All electric is something you can develop in any building, period. Here's a nice example in Hawaii. There's tons and tons of all electric fancy buildings in Hawaii, like this Hilton here. I've sent my staff around to call all of the resorts in Hawaii to find out which ones use gas. Because Hawaii doesn't have natural gas off the coast, there is no place to drill for it anywhere nearby. It has to come from the United States in a tanker, essentially. It can't come from any other country. It's actually the law that they have to receive fuel from the mainland. So it's incredibly expensive. They get this fuel, it arrives, they have to reprocess it because it's not actually natural gas, and then they put it into the pipelines. And most people just don't want to bother. It's just so pricey to get it there. And lots and lots of buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s before there was natural gas, or the equivalent of it, before it was even available on the island. So like everything that you ever saw Elvis in Hawaii, that was all electric. All the fun movies from the 60s and 70s when Hawaii just sort of became a thing as it became a new state. The whole mystique of Hawaii is built off an all electric building plan. When you go there and you stay in some Airbnb or whatever, much more likely than not, you're gonna have an electric kitchen. I think that's worth noting is because people go to Hawaii because they love it. And there's some concern like maybe that's all electric kitchens aren't good enough. And no, it's like people who spend crazy amounts of money to go to Hawaii go to an all electric kitchen and love it. Here's examples of if you were developing a multifamily building that had a restaurant on the ground floor and you were wondering like, well, would that be okay to make it an all electric restaurant? Here's all electric restaurants in New York City. On the right-hand side, Sola is a pretty darn famous one. It's a pasta place, and they use an induction wok. You can see this fellow, he's got a nice wok in front of him, but yeah, oyster bars and Mongolian hot pots and sandwich places and the whole bit. There are large swaths of the South where natural gas can't get to communities because the water table is too high. And so everything in the town is all electric. All the fancy restaurants, all the fancy beachfront condos, etc. You'll find that in Delaware, the Panhandle of Florida, Hawaii, a variety of places that, yeah. So here is an illustration of how those cost increases happen in the real world. This is all done from studies in California by the utilities. So on the right-hand side, these are rate-based costs. This is not the developer paying it. This is you paying it when you pay your utility bills. So the $7 million of natural gas well, the $80 million station that has to be put in every 50 to 60 miles to pressurize the gas, the $5 million to $43 million per mile of high pressure transmission. California gets 90% of its gas through these high pressure transmission lines from other states. And then you get to the more regional high pressure distribution where it's $136 to $180 just a linear foot. That's all rate-based. To the left-hand side in orangish colors, these are developer paid. So these get charged in just a first cost on your construction budget. So if you're developing a new street, you're going to be paying $140 to $300 a linear foot to develop the 2-inch gas line in the street. It's pretty common, you know, for subdivisions or any other like new construction to have to put in gas in the street for a distance. Then there's gas delivered to the building from the street, and that is $16,000 for a single family house. For apartment complexes, it's between $30,000 and $100,000. So downtown Los Angeles, $100,000 to disrupt the street, rip it up, put in the lateral gas line to where it needs to go for the building, close the street back up, 100 grand. More than the cost of the gas boiler that it's trying to serve. It's like a gigantic cost. Then it gets into the building, it costs $200 to $1,000 per fixture to run gas to each fixture. So it might be $800 to a couple $1,000 an apartment just to have plumbing in the walls. And then you get to the actual devices where a heat pump is $1,000 to $3,000 cheaper than putting in a furnace and air conditioner. Water heaters are usually cost neutral. The dryer is definitely more expensive by $100 if you put in gas. The stoves are definitely $100 or more expensive as you put in gas. These are for identical models. Stove manufacturers put out identical gas and electric models. So it's really easy to say, oh yeah, the gas is consistently $100 more. The effort of plumbing a stove with gas costs more than the effort of electrifying a stove. Here is a nice, this is the exact same manufacturer. This is essentially the same sales we're getting here. What you're seeing is the difference between having on the top, this is an air conditioner, just that. It's with the same one, the Rheem 3-ton 14 SEER. In the middle, this is what happens. It just goes from 1758 up to 2085. This is if you make that air conditioner reversible. So it has a reversible pump, it has one more valve, and it has some like computer controls logic to control that. But essentially, it's just another valve and a reversible pump. So it's a couple $100 more, $300 more. If you take that same air conditioner from the top and you add a gas furnace, it's not a few $100 more, it's like $1,200 more. That is the difference between a heat pump and an air conditioner furnace. That's just true across the market. It costs more to add a gas burning box to an air conditioner than it costs to add heat pump functionality to that air conditioner. And it's not a little bit, it's a fair amount actually. Oh, there's 19 questions here. Panama's asked me not to stop and answer questions. So just so you all know, I see you. We'll do it in a couple minutes here.
We'll get them, John.
Yeah. It's the science teacher in me. I hate making people wait for their questions because, then you forget. But here we are. This is a developer over in Philadelphia. No, wait a minute. It's in Pennsylvania. Is it Pittsburgh or Philadelphia? Dang it, I'm forgetting. But Tim McDonald. So in the upper left-hand corner, Tim and his two brothers, they are the development team. They're the architect, they're the general contractor, and they're the realtor. All these three brothers do these projects, and they have all the internal numbers. So in the upper left-hand corner at $129 a square foot, this is a passive house, a low-income apartment complex, $129 a square foot. Down below at $169 a square foot, still passive house. This now has a canopy PV array, so it's completely powering everything below it. And you can also see he put in color monitors. So basically the colors on the outside show if apartments are using their energy budget well, which is green, versus yellow or red. And it's anonymous, but as you're walking by on the street, you can see essentially how people in general are doing with their energy budgets. But like I said, it's not specific. You might be able to figure out which of those little colorized screens is yours, but other people don't know. And on the right-hand side, this is his new design standard, which is to cover 3 sides of the walls and the roof in solar power at $157 a square foot. It's passive house, and it's completely solar powered. It's got commercial uses on the ground floor and I think 4 stories of apartments above it. $157 a square foot for that. Passive house, zero net energy. In California, we haven't seen $157 a square foot for apartments in years. It's right now you'd spend $350 and north for anything. So there are regional differences in construction price, but internal to that city, to that developer, you can see him making the point that this doesn't cost anything more than standard ways of building. Earlier we mentioned that one of the trickier things to do in apartment complexes is to make a heat pump water heater serve the whole building. Heat pumps don't work the same way as gas, so you have to learn a new and different design strategy. But once you know that strategy, then it's simple. So it's not like it's more difficult than putting in a gas boiler. It's just different. So you need to know how to size usually double or triple the amount of tank storage for water. That's the main thing. And you also try to split the heat loss of the recirculation loop. You try not to put that straight through the original heat pump. You may have a separate heater for it. And those two strategies of heating the recirc loop separately and putting in more storage are the design solutions for heat pump water heaters. And you can see on the left, Chiltrex, Colmac, Space Pack, and then to the right there, that's Mitsubishi. These are all heat pumps that are essentially doing the same job. And that up on the top there, that's the Sandin. That's very popular in California. Here's an example of Sandins being put into existing apartment complexes. It's been done like 20, 30 times, I think, that I know of, at least here in California, where they took out the gas boiler and they put in Sandins. Sandin produces very hot water, about 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and can do it at super cold temperatures, so it's reliable year-round. And you can see the energy savings in the lower left, like it's in the box there. You can see how energy consumption dropped to the floor once the retrofit was in. And this included putting in LED lights and some low flow fixtures, but the vast majority of this energy savings is from the gas boiler. Here's another project, Project B, up in the upper right-hand corner. You can see the construction period, and then after the retrofit, energy consumption way down. And then savings, cost savings. This also reduced the utility bills. So this is not the energy, but it's the actual money part of it down below, central heat pump water heater cost savings. So it did everything, saved energy, saved money. There is a misunderstanding out there that gas is cheap. People say this as if those words were backed up by fact, and they're not. It's distressing. It distresses me to see the gas companies having succeeded in what I consider a propaganda effort to just make a phrase stick in people's mind. So gas is not cheap. If you pay gas bills in most of the country, you have a deregulated price in the wintertime. So right here in the left-hand side, you can see in gray in the 2012, 2013, how the price of gas in blue jumps. And then in the next winter, how the price of gas jumps again. And the winter after that, it jumps again. 2015-16, very small bump. What is going on is that when people need gas the most, it costs the most. And it doesn't cost like a little bit more. It often costs 10 times as much in the month of, say, February. You have your peak usage, and gas prices will go through the roof. And people will suffer that month and then forget. And they won't do the analysis to say, like, well, what was the price for the whole year? Not the average price of gas, because we're not using gas the same way all year round. We want to know the seasonal price of gas when we're actually using it in gargantuan quantities to stay warm. And it turns out that because electricity is a fairly stable price over the course of the year, that if you put in a heat pump that was only 245% efficient, at this apartment complex. This is Holly Hall. It's in Maryland. You can see on the bottom right-hand corner what's being replaced. These are both affordable housing, but on the top it's 3 stories, and on the bottom it's 11 stories total. And when I was working with this developer, we had to go through this analysis of saying, like, well, for this project right here, would it be cheaper to operate with gas or with electricity? And we found that even if it's like a low efficiency, 245% efficient is low. The 450% is what the Sandin does. 450% efficient, meaning 1 unit of electricity is used to operate the compressor, and 4.5 units of equivalent energy heat are pulled out of the air and stuck in the water. That's what the heat pump is doing. So you could pretty much get any heat pump out there and get a cheaper bill out of this site because of the seasonal pricing of gas. The fact that when people need it the most, it costs so much more, which is not the case for electricity, for space heating. So gas is not cheap, gas is expensive. It's easy usually to beat, in our country, nationally, it's easy to beat gas in most markets. It can be trickier in California because we have very high electricity prices, some of the highest in the whole country. But on average, throughout our country, in about 2/3 of the states, it's significantly cheaper to run on electricity. Easy peasy. On the left-hand side, you can see with average electricity pricing and an efficient heat pump water heater. And on the right-hand side, you can see for average gas pricing for the most efficient gas water heater that I could find that was like equivalent. So these things are, 95% efficient gas versus 370% efficient for the heat pump water heater. And it's cheaper. On the left-hand side, you can see it's literally off the scale. The scale was set to gas, and so $225 is the least of any product that's sold in the United States for this tank gas water heater. That's the smallest bill on average you'd get, is $225. And with this heat pump water heater, it's $161. It's dramatic. It's consistent. This is a real thing. People, of course, we have so many buildings that exist. So getting retrofit ready products for an inexpensive electrification effort, I'm just showing you some examples. On the left-hand side, these are heat pumps that are 120 volt, don't take more energy than a hairdryer on medium for a cold climate, and one circuit. They're like use the same amount of energy as an electric wall heater that you might just plug in because you wanted to. On the right-hand side on the top, that's a different type of heat pump. That's a mini split, but same thing. Compressor goes outside, fan coil goes inside. On the bottom here, these are combined washer dryers. So you don't have to have your clothing turn moldy because you forgot to take it from the washer to the dryer, and you don't have to have arguments with your spouse about who left the laundry in. These just go from dry laundry that's dirty to dry laundry that's clean. And you don't have to do anything in between. It takes 3 hours, and this is hugely popular over the whole planet. You go to Japan and China and Europe and Australia, all over the place, you'll find condensing washer dryers. We do big loads of laundry in the United States because the United States uses 1/3 of the world's resources, and we have more clothes than we know what to do with. So these small models you'll find in other countries, not popular in the United States, but LG has a large one, like a 4.5 cubic foot washer dryer. And they're starting to come out of the market more broadly to have big ones to satisfy American style laundry. But they use half the energy of an electric resistance dryer. And again, they plug in to any outlet in the house. They don't need a 240 volt line. They don't take too much energy. They're very efficient. So that, let's see, we're at 10:52, so I want to make sure I get to the end here. Cooking with gas can harm children. This is well known. If you're cooking on gas, it raises the incidence of heart attack symptoms in the home cook, the asthma symptoms for the home cook. If you're standing in front of a gas stove, it's hurting your lungs bad. It's also extra bad for children. Tons and tons of unnecessary asthma are being caused by gas stoves. In Australia, they're saying it's about 12% of the asthma is just because the kid was raised in a house with a gas stove. Gas stoves produce the equivalent of smog. The air inside of a kitchen, it's invisible. Nitrogen dioxide is not a visible like smoke that comes off of gas stoves, but it's there. And when it mixes with the food grease, it turns into literal smog, just as bad as downtown Los Angeles. And you've seen this in your kitchen. You've seen it turn smoggy, but you might not have realized that, no, it's actually that bad. This is hurting you. This is filthy, dangerous fossil fuel air. You're burning gasoline in your house, essentially. It's not the exact same part of the stack of the hydrocarbon stack when they take fuels off different parts of a tank for different thicknesses, but it's the same stuff, and it's just as bad for you. So we're seeing it getting banned. In California, it started on August 6th last year in Berkeley. They did a complete gas ban. No buildings at all of any type are allowed to put in natural gas plumbing into the walls. They restricted it on the basis of health and safety, because it's an earthquake zone, and gas piping causes about half of the fires after an earthquake, and challenge public resources to respond to all those fires. On the right-hand side, you can see an early adopter of all electric in the Bay Area, RCD, which has 2 of these developments that are going up here that are 6 stories tall, all electric, and putting solar up on the roof, as we've discussed. And now I'll respond to the 35 questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. I think that everyone sees that you lived up to the billing of being the leader you are in the space, so I appreciate it. What we're going to do, folks, is we're going to let Sean, do you have time to run over for questions, run over the hour?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm here until we're done.
Okay. Yeah, so what we'll do, this is being recorded. Members of the coalition are able to see the recording after the fact. We will go through the questions and let Sean answer them. So if you can stay on through getting your question answered, please do. Otherwise, feel free to leave as your schedule dictates. And so I'm going to start with the first question, and then I'm going to run over and give a presentation somewhere else. And Ashley Spurgeon from the coalition will take over. So first question's from Eugene Lee. The cash flow illustration results in radically changing the debt coverage ratio. This is from early on in the presentation.
Yep.
Doesn't this impact the loan underwriting requirements from different funders?
Yes. So you want to do this at the beginning of a project so that it's baked in. But housing authority utility allowances are bedrock to affordable housing financing since the beginning, like in the 60s. So every bank, every financing agency knows that there's a utility allowance. And this is a swap out, like a 1-for-1 swap out. People don't challenge it. The banks, the financing agencies, no one expresses concern that there's a low utility allowance. It's just, you know, if it's legitimate, then you just keep on moving. Next.
Great, thank you. A number of questions about solar coverage. So in order to make your magic work, how much solar coverage do you really need to be able to actually make that work? You know, what's the minimum PV offset that you would need in order to make your CUAC magic work?
Well, any amount. In California, you can put up, say, like a 50 kilowatt array, and then divide it up at the billing department with what's called virtual net metering. And that program exists in most states in the United States. I think at least half now. So you can get, and all of it benefits them. You know, half a kilowatt of solar, which is, you know, that's like half of a sheet of plywood worth of solar. Just a few panels, a couple panels, any amount works. It all gets valued and it all helps out.
Great, fantastic. A number of questions about storage. Have you worked in projects and using your technique with storage? And how does that pencil, and what are you seeing on the storage side about being able to put it into affordable housing projects?
Well, I know of only one affordable housing developer over in Vermont that is doing solar plus storage for apartments. And so in California, I've had clients now asking for storage, but it's for the scheduled power outages. So people, what they're trying to do with storage is not do arbitrage with their bills, but instead provide tenants with emergency services. Like there's a battery to make sure that people's refrigerators continue to work during a 2-day power outage, and they can still charge their cell phones. And so we'll put the kitchen on the common load. We'll wire it to the common load, like we'll wire it to the hallway instead of to the rest of the apartment's panel, so that in a power outage, we can have a central battery that keeps everyone's kitchens going. That's different from using it for like selling the storage potential back to the grid. That's being done. I think there's one, I think in Utah, there's one developer who's done that for market rate where they put a Sonnen battery in every single apartment. But fundamentally, batteries are expensive. There's very little payback, if any, like it might be decades. of payback to try. I mean, right now, that's how it works, that batteries are not to be put in as a cost-effective measure. They're to be put in for emergencies. They're not, so that's it. They're just not cost-effective at this point. There's a similar question about time of use rates, and how do time of use rates affect utility allowances? And that is a mess. We tried to analyze that almost the individual times on our own homes for our solar arrays, and it makes a humongous difference when energy is used and how much. And because tenants use energy in radically different ways, it's almost impossible. We spent like a half year trying to build spreadsheets around it, and it is infinitely complex, and the results are entirely dependent upon the assumptions that go in, and the assumptions aren't well confirmed or known. Like, how do people use energy? And so there's just no way to understand it right now. It's too messy. But so that's the answer. Batteries, not that cost effective. Time of use rates are just uninterpretable. We'll have to see how it works, but we can't model it yet.
All right, I'm going to take over moderating the questions, and I'm going to grab one that says, I like the idea of increasing the ability to leverage more private debt, but doesn't more amortized debt negatively impact affordability? California Central Valley projects or deeply income targeted projects are tight already. What am I missing?
Let's see here. Can you read the question one more time? I want to make sure this is a technical one. Go ahead.
I like the idea of increasing the ability to leverage more private debt, but doesn't more amortized debt negatively impact affordability? California Central Valley project. Sorry,
okay.
Go ahead.
So it doesn't negatively affect affordability in the sense that the total housing cost burden, which is the net rent plus the utilities, those two things are the regulated amount under, their 30% of their income is set aside for housing costs, rent and utilities. So if you change the balance where they pay more rent while they pay less utilities, it has no effect on the affordability, but it does have an effect on the amount of loan that you can raise. So the impact is that it brings more money into a development without hurting the tenants at all. Everything's just neutral for them, or even a benefit frequently in some ways. So Central Valley projects we've found be just perfect. There's really high utility bills in the Central Valley. The utility allowances are large. If we do a zero net energy project, and we've done a lot of them in the Central Valley, like dozens, it's an effective way to do it. So the only challenge we've run into is when TCAC says that there's a maximum cap on the amount of money that you can ask for. And if putting in a solar array goes past that threshold, okay, then we've got a problem. We haven't run into that often, but we have, like in the Bay Area where we're trying to do a 6-story tall zero net energy building, and the canopy solar array, which is $4,200 a kilowatt instead of, say, $3,200 a kilowatt if it wasn't a canopy that you can walk underneath. That additional cost we've seen bump into the funding threshold. But otherwise, it's a benefit.
All right, we've got another one from Peter Armstrong. I think the idea is that when you use the CUAC, more rent goes to the owner versus lost to utility allowance. Yeah. That means the same amount of gross rent can go to a more hard debt payment. I see very different UA savings from using the CUAC depending on the housing authority and the climate zone. Yeah. On some projects, there are huge savings from CUAC. On other projects, the CUAC produces the same or a slightly higher UA. Do you agree?
Yes, that's true. The distinction is that if you put solar onto a CUAC, you can get utility allowances down to $5, and there's no such thing like that for a housing authority. Although I think Kern County now, is their official housing authority is putting out a utility allowance that's a $5 utility allowance if you've committed to a zero net energy development. So Um, that's just sort of coming out. I haven't actually seen that. I just having talked with the director that was what their goal was. So yeah, if you haven't put solar on it, using the CUAC will generally be a benefit in the Central Valley. Generally be a bad thing to do if you're in the Bay Area, because the housing authority's utility allowances are lower than what the CUAC would predict for just an apartment without solar. Once you put solar on and you're making it, this talk is a zero carbon affordable housing talk. Once you make it zero carbon, you really want to use the CUAC. And I'll elaborate. Right now, the code for 3-story and less construction in California, the 2019 code requires a 60% solar energy offset to get a building permit. Now, all affordable housing that's 1 to 3 stories is going to have to do that, and they're not going to get any different utility allowance unless they use the CUAC, the California Utility Allowance Calculator. So we're at that point now where everyone's required for their low-rise development to put in a solar array, and that'll just be an additional cost of a few $100,000 without a way of recapturing that unless they make a project-specific utility allowance. So kind of like everyone in California who's doing those low-rise buildings, I think would be well served, regardless if it's in the Bay Area or anywhere else. Once you have a 60% solar offset, it'll make a dramatic difference in the utility allowances.
Okay, can you still use a CUAC on a project with Section 8 project-based vouchers? Will you have separate utility allowances for PVV units and non-PVV units?
Yes. Yeah, so well, we often have projects that have a mixture of housing vouchers and non-housing vouchers. And so the apartments with a housing voucher, they will be using the standard housing authority's utility allowance. And then the other apartments, they'll be using a CUAC to set their utility allowance. So all the apartments will get solar. They'll all get treated the same, but the apartments that are not using Section 8 housing vouchers will use a project-specific utility allowance. And so that means like maybe 10 or 20% of an apartment complex, and I'm just thinking of them off the top of my head, that they wouldn't be able to benefit from that increased rent as they increase the amount of solar that goes into it. But on balance, it still works out.
All right, I think we're going to do one more and then call it a day. Does it increase the underlying physical asset value, and does the solar increase the appraised value?
The appraised value for resale, like at the 15-year mark, if the question's about that, the appraised value is going to be based upon the rent and the amount of money that the project can bring in. So definitely, if you're doing an appraisal based upon revenue, then it'll show up and be valued. There's like 3 different ways of doing appraisals. So if you're doing appraisals based upon comps, where you look at other similar buildings, yes, appraisers right now have the skills and do it, where they'll show what, I've seen this in houses, single family homes, where they'll take like 14 homes that have solar arrays as the comp, and then they'll say what was the net increase in the value of those homes, probably because of the solar array, and then and the numbers come out about the same. You'll say like the revenue version of it might give you, on a house, might give you like $12,000 or $14,000 more in value. And similarly, if you do the comps strategy, you'll get about that same amount of money. I'm thinking single family homes. Yeah, so it gets valued at resale. That might not have been true 10 years ago when people didn't really know what they're doing, but they do know now. I'm just gonna look real quickly, Ashley, to see if there's any other questions I wanted to get at. Panama was kind of my style. I love answering questions. Let's see, there's a range of cost for on-site batteries. Since I haven't seen them very much, what I've seen is that if I was to try to offset 5% of the apartment complex, which is about that kitchen, I'm seeing batteries that are like $60,000 to $100,000 for, say, like a 40-unit development. But I've also seen like just the elevator battery. If you're gonna deal with the fact that if you have a power outage, you have to have some sort of backup energy for the elevator. Just an elevator battery is $70,000. I've been startled to see that the elevator battery was the same size that I would want for the whole rest of the apartment complex. And this battery is just going in to make sure that the elevator worked, once every couple of years. There would be this issue of having someone stuck in the elevator when the power went out, if that. So yeah, they're not that expensive. They're not catastrophic, but I also don't know exactly how to make them work with the utility allowances, so I don't want to push that. Joseph, you asked, in Oregon, the gas company pays for connecting gas lines to the home from the road. How common is that? Oh, it's really common, but they don't pay for it. You pay for it. They just loan you the money, and then they'll bill you every year until they get the money back through their bills. That's how that rolls. So there's no free lunch. You pay for it. It's just through electricity. They don't usually pay for the gas in the walls, and they don't pay for the additional gas cost of appliances being more expensive if they use gas. So there's still savings to be had even in that scenario. And the example I gave at the beginning of Vancouver, where the utility there, the gas utility, offered to also pay for the gas piping in the building, it was still rejected, in part because they're trying to build passive house there, and the additional air pollution inside of a residence that comes from burning gas inside of it, it's so dangerous in a tightly sealed residence that as people get more serious about building insulated, tight buildings, there's just no allowance for putting gas in. It's too dangerous. You'll poison people. Yeah, thank you. It's Philadelphia. Deborah, Kyle, thank you. Let's see. Love the vertical solar, says Kyle. Me too. I love it. Then, okay. Kyle didn't know that there's combo clothes washers and dryers. Yeah, they're so common. Like if you go to a big box in Japan, there'll just be a gigantic floor of them. I could show you that slide deck. My brother went to Japan and took pictures for me in a big box, and it was just amazing to see. The walls are covered with ductless mini split heat pumps. That's what they're selling in big boxes. And all the washer dryers are combos. And all the stove ranges are induction with these little like drawer ovens in them. Japan is so far down the path of building all electric, so much further than we are. Yeah, you just don't even recognize things that are for sale there. There are commercial heat pump dryers made by Speed Queen. Shanti Pless, you wanted to know about that? Yep, Speed Queen makes now coin-operated heat pump dryers for laundromats. And the question of humidity added to the space of the heat pump dryers actually condense the water out of the air, and then it goes down a drain. So they don't add any humidity to an apartment, and neither do they pull heat through the dryer the way that a dryer now pulls air into it and then exhausts it. So they don't destabilize like your heating system in your house or your air conditioning. They don't pull air into them. They just condense the water and it flushes down a drain. Yes, Michelle Brooks, please get rid of gas in Massachusetts. They're doing great leadership work there. Yep, gas cooking harms kids. Well, you guys are active here. Just, okay. Thanks, I'm glad people were commenting to each other though. Does the praise value? Oh, right, and Deborah Little is here actually talking. She could have done the appraisal. She's the one who taught me about the 3 different ways of doing the appraising of solar. And she says, yes, it does increase property value. Last one, for the retrofits, did you need to do work on the envelope to get to zero net energy, or did you need to increase the solar array for an older building? That's a great question. It depends upon the climate, but it is very difficult to retrofit the exterior of a building. So difficult that it's almost impossible, like for instance, to rip off the siding and not disrupt the people that are living in the homes for long periods of time. And there are lots of people doing work on how to do quick facade retrofits. But when we're doing zero net energy electrification work, which we've done, 100% solar offset, got rid of the gas loads, put in electric devices in low-income apartments, We've just put in higher efficiency heat pumps to compensate for the low efficiency walls. And then, yes, we did put a larger solar array on the roof because most of the loads in the house are not the HVAC load. Like they're the water heater, the plug loads, the cooking, the lights. That's the majority of the load. And it has no, so we do the same solar array for all those loads. And then the HVAC load is the variable, depending upon climate. So, you know, in San Diego and in the Bay Area, this is not that heating or cooling of a climate, just like HVAC is not a big deal. When we try to do it in the Mojave Desert, it's impossible. Like you have to retrofit those buildings, you know, improve the windows and the walls. We found like to do a zero net energy apartment complex in the Mojave Desert, we really want to be using triple pane windows and like an exterior sheet foam insulation of 2 inches. All of that becomes genuinely important in truly extreme climates. It's also for comfort. I mean, when it's 110 degrees outside, if you have a bad envelope, it's really hard to keep your house cool enough, just period. It's so hot. Even the air conditioners don't work very well at that temperature. So working on the facades is important. Okay, that was the last question. Thank you, Ashley, for humoring me there.
Of course. Thank you for giving us your time. Thank you for everyone who joined us and for sticking with us past the hour. If you are members of the coalition, the presentation will be placed in the member portal. If you're not members of the coalition, you should be, so email me. So have a great rest of your week. Thank you all, and we will see you next week for another amazing BDC Presents. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, everybody.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.